The Nikon D5000 was released back in 2009. Now, at the time, it cost around $700. Nowadays, you can find it used for about $150. So, just what do you get with this 12-year-old camera? Well, there's a 12.3 megapixel sensor, an 11-point autofocus system, and a 230K 2.7-inch LCD screen that flips downward, and it also turns all the way around so you can actually see yourself when you're filming or taking pictures. Build quality on the D5000 is actually pretty good. You know, for a small camera, it's actually got a little bit of weight to it. D5000 kind of comes in that low-middle range. You know, it's not as fancy as, say, the D90 or the D300, but it's not as low-end as the D3000. It's pretty good. It just kind of sits right there in between. Autofocus on the Nikon D5000 is surprisingly good considering what it is. You know, you've only got 11 autofocus points, but somehow, some way, Nikon manages to actually do a lot with those 11 points, and it's pretty accurate. In terms of photography, the D5000 is actually really good. You know, I've said it time and time again, but Nikon has some of the best color science, especially on those older DSLRs from like the early to mid 2000s. Just JPEGs straight out of this camera are so nice and saturated and contrasty, but without being like overdone in a kind of GoPro fashion. You know, instead it's just like this really beautiful subtlety that a lot of other camera companies don't seem to have. You know, for the longest time, back in those days, I would actually just shoot things in JPEG because I was so happy with the way everything looks straight out of the camera. It's like, I didn't really even feel like bothering to edit it because I like the colors so much. Now, in terms of video, this camera does 720p at 30 frames per second, and that's it. You know, you've got to remember, this came out back in 2009, and at that point, it was actually like a novelty for DSLRs to even have a video mode. You know, it was this camera's big brother, the Nikon D90, that was actually the very first DSLR to ever have video. So, it was perfectly acceptable back then for an entry-level camera to have just 720p, 30 frames per second footage, but by modern standards, it kind of lags behind. So of course, that begs the obvious question, is the Nikon D5000 worth it in 2021? And this is kind of a tough one for me. See, I started getting into photography back in 1986. I shot film for all of those years. I was very excited in the late 90s and early 2000s when digital started coming around and it was just new technology, but by the mid 2000s, I was just kind of burned out, man. Like, I just kind of quit doing photography. But it was in 2009 that I picked up this very Nikon D5000 and I found that passion all over again. So the point being, I genuinely love this camera. It's very nostalgic for me, but I don't know that any of you guys, and especially a lot of you guys are probably way younger than me, probably have no nostalgia whatsoever for this entry-level camera, and it's kind of hard for me to recommend it in that sense because at $150, you know, you can get a Sony NEX5R for about 130 bucks, and that's a more modern camera. You know, it's got 16 megapixels. It does 1080p at both 24 and 60 frames per second. It has a screen that flips all the way up so you can actually film yourself for like YouTube videos and all that. It's kind of hard to recommend a D5000 over something like that that's actually $20 cheaper and has a lot more newer features. You know, if all you care about is photography and you're already a Nikon user, you've already got a ton of Nikon lenses, then yes, for you, I would definitely recommend it. I mean, it's great for photography. But if you're like me and you're actually looking for both photo and video, it's kind of hard to recommend the D5000 just knowing that something like that whole Sony NEX line is out there, all around the same price with much more modern features. Still, it is a great camera though. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.